Hello, FPL managers. Welcome to the FPL Optimized podcast. This is episode number 68. And I must already say it will be a bit an unusual one as I'll be recording it alone. I am Bas, the casual manager, and my co-host usually is Sertop, the data scientist. But unfortunately, he isn't feeling too well today. So it will be just me, but it's still the podcast in which we combine analytics with the good old eye test. Data or grass, or data and grass? That's the question. So yeah, Sertop isn't here, but he still prepared the data and I'll be covering it alone as we wanted to keep the weekly rhythm of our podcast. And actually, let me give a shout out to Sertop as this is episode number 68. And so far, he has been part of every episode, even when I was away sometimes. He was always here. Unfortunately, today it's not the case, but next time, hopefully, he will be back. Thank you, Sertop, for all you do. I'll be still covering our usual content, so let's dive into it right away. And first up is a review of how our previous game week went. And I finally managed to beat Sertop again with my score of 47 points versus his score of 45. So yeah, maybe that's why he wasn't feeling too well this week. That's a joke, of course. All right, well, it brings the score in our head-to-head competition to 7-6, still in his advantage, but it's getting closer. For me, well, I must admit I made quite a big mistake. I was thinking and talking about Kudus the whole week. I did that also in the podcast. But then last minute on Friday night, I decided to save some budget and I went for Ward-Prowse instead, which then allowed me to also move from Nketiah to Solanke for a -4. And you could say that it backfired as Kudus had quite a good week with 10 points and my new guys only delivered 2 points each. So that wasn't too great. Even though you could say in the Bournemouth game, I got a bit unlucky. Bournemouth did really well. They won 1-3. Normally, you would expect Solanke to be among the goal scorers, but this time it wasn't the case. But yeah, still not really a smart move, I think, taking that -4. So yeah, I'll try to learn from that. But talking about the positives, Onana was brilliant in the United goal. He had a 9-pointer, so that's really nice. And as some people pointed out on Twitter, he's now actually the second highest scoring goalkeeper in the game behind Alisson. So Onana, one to watch. Pedro Porro, also really happy to have him in my team. He looked really lively. He delivered 5 points. Could have been more, I think, if he would be a bit more lucky, or if Spurs would be able to keep a clean sheet again, which so recently they're struggling. Also 5 points for Salah, 8 for Saka, and 7 for Haaland. And unfortunately, I gave the armband to Son, who only scored 2 points despite his hat-trick of offside goals. So yeah, also on that one, a bit unlucky. But it is what it is. So I did beat Sertop. I still had a red arrow though, so I cannot be happy with that. And I need to improve my OR. So let's shift attention to the upcoming game weeks. And as always, we'll start with looking at our fixture ticker. First, let's take a look at the top teams. And for the people listening to the podcast, I'll mention the teams from the top. First is Liverpool. They have 2 attractive games coming up now. First at home against Fulham and then away to Sheffield. And also after that, a few decent games, especially with Burnley in game week 19. But before that, they do face United and Arsenal. So yeah, also a few more difficult games there. After Liverpool, who was number 1 in the chart, number 2 is Arsenal, also with a few good games coming up. First now against Wolves and then Luton away. But also that one, it's maybe not as easy as it looks like, as we said it before, and we've seen it also in the previous game week. Luton away hasn't been an easy game so far this season. Number 3 in the chart is Man City, even though they have a blank in game week 18. And after City, it's Newcastle, Chelsea, Brighton, Man United, Villa, Spurs, and Brentford in that order. So yeah, what else can we say about this chart? I think we should mention Chelsea again, like we also did in previous weeks. You know, their fixtures are really improving, especially as of game week 17. So that's definitely a team to watch. And I think we should also look at Brentford, even they are low here in this chart, but especially for the next few game weeks. You know, they have Luton at home, Brighton away, and then Sheffield away. So those are three quite good games. But then keep in mind that Brentford will have a blank in game week 18, and that's probably the reason why they are a bit low here on this chart. So these are the top teams. Let's now look at the bottom half, and I'll mention the teams again starting from the top, in this case from the worst one. So that's Luton, then it's Sheffield, then it's Crystal Palace. After that, Fulham, Nottingham, Everton, Bournemouth, and Burnley. So I think in this chart, it's quite interesting to see Crystal Palace on number 3. Crystal Palace is a good team. But now in the next 6 weeks, they will actually face a few difficult weeks. They will play Liverpool, they will play City, and also Chelsea. So the next run is not so good for them. That's something you should keep in mind. And the same could be said for Everton. We thought they were improving, but then they lost now 3-0 against United. So let's see what that will do to their team morale, especially also considering that they have difficult games coming up with, for example, Newcastle, Chelsea, Tottenham, and City in the next 6. So not too easy for Everton, something again also to keep in mind. So yeah, if you look at this chart, then you could consider that these are teams you should be avoiding if you're making transfers, if you rely on the data, of course. Then the next chart we can take a look at is the one provided by RobT. Thank you, Rob. Here we can see the predicted goals for game week 14 and also the clean sheet odds. And looking at this chart, we can see that there are a few teams who are predicted to have comfortable wins, actually. So number 1 is Liverpool with 2.7 goals versus Fulham. Number 2 is City with 2.65 goals against Tottenham. And number 3 is Arsenal with 2.3 goals against Wolves. So one thing I think that's interesting is that the top 3 teams here all have a home game, and also against decent opponents. Decent meaning, should be easy wins, or relatively easy. Arsenal at home against Wolves, even though Wolves has been doing quite well in recent games. Liverpool at home against Fulham, and City at home against Tottenham, which normally, of course, is a tough team, but yeah, they are struggling related to injuries and suspensions. So City might be meeting Tottenham at the right moment. Sorry. And we can also see the same actually in the clean sheet odds, because it's again the same teams with the highest percentage there. So number 1 in this case is Arsenal with 52%, then followed by Liverpool 45%, and then City 41%. So yeah, the top 3 teams look quite good, both from a attacking as also defensive perspective. So again, something to keep in mind for your transfers this week. So yeah, I think that summarizes it on a team level. Then let's now look at it on a player level, as we usually do, by looking at the players gaining and dropping in EV. And if we start with the gainers, then let me just go through the top 10. So it's Isaac, number 1, number 2, Tsimikas, then Raya, Trossard, Livramento, Shaw, Mitoma, Gordon, Gabriel Jesus, and Saka. So yeah, here Isaac, number 1. We talked about it last week. Wilson is injured, so Isaac now has the number 9 spot. And we can also be quite certain about his minutes, even though something that is also being said by other managers, for example, on Twitter or in other podcasts, is that we know that Isaac also has a record of injuries. And with the busy season coming up, especially for Newcastle, so many games in a short time window, it is, of course, the question whether Isaac can stay fit. But if he does stay fit and if he starts, we know that he usually scores a goal. So definitely a player we could bet on, and we can see that also here in the EV, especially for game week 14, an increase by almost 1 point. Tsimikas, his place looks, I think, secure, even though recently Joe Gomez started, so that maybe created some doubts for some people. But I think as long as Robertson is out, Tsimikas is the natural replacer. And then Raya, also quite secure in the goal of Arsenal, and Arsenal just having a very strong defense. So I think the model is just adjusting itself to the certainty of minutes and also the strength of the defense. And I think those are probably the top three we should mention. Another one maybe that stands out is Gordon at Newcastle. He's been doing really well, especially in the home games. So that's also, I think, someone that people now have on their radar. Okay, so these are the gainers. Let's now look at the ones that dropped in EV. And I'll just mention the names again. Number 1 is Dunk, then Akanji, Wilson, Havertz, Walker, Jensen, Ruben Diaz, Doucouré, Cash, and Sarr. Something that I noticed here is that we see 3 City defenders with Akanji, Walker, and Ruben Diaz. So that's quite interesting. I think maybe the model is also changing a little bit here, the perspective on the strength of the City defense. I think if you saw also the Champions League game yesterday, they were beaten quite easily at 2 occasions, going 2-0 down. So they didn't look too strong there. And we see therefore some drop in the EV. And number 1 is Dunk, who is now suspended. And so that has an immediate impact, of course, on the EV as well. And number 3 is Wilson due to his injury. All right, that covers the players that have dropped in EV. Then that brings us to the optimal team for this week. And especially for me, this is interesting as I activated my wildcard. Yes, I did. It's maybe strange timing, I don't know, because people also say that if you still have it, it could be good to keep it until later, like game week 19 or maybe even game week 20. But for me, as I mentioned last time, there's now a busy season coming up in December, and I just want to get ready for it. My team can be freshened up a bit, can be strengthened a bit, and that's why I would like to use my wildcard now. Also to benefit maybe from a few fixture swings, like the one for Chelsea coming up. So that's my thinking. Also, of course, having in my mind that my OR isn't too great yet, and I still want to improve. So let's take a look at the team that Surtop Solver generated based on the data, and then I can also share some of my considerations. So looking at the team, so the starting lineup is Flacken in goal, then in the defense, 3 defenders, Gabriel, Pinnock, Tsimikas, 4 midfielders, Saka, Mbuemo, Salah, Palmer, and then 3 in the attack with Solanke, Darwin, and Haaland. And then the bench of Sanchez, Hichan, Pau, and Pedro Porro. So a few things to notice, I think. First is quite a strong bench. So this is probably also having in mind that there's a busy period coming up, lots of games coming up. So having a strong bench will be quite important. I also can see rotating goalkeepers here proposed by the solver. So Flacken from Brentford and Sanchez from Chelsea. Personally, I'm looking at Sanchez as well. Attractive price and good fixtures coming up for Chelsea. But indeed, the next fixtures are maybe not the most easy ones, with first Brighton, who so far have been scoring goals in every game, and then also Man United away. So maybe it's not a bad idea to have a second goalkeeper potentially to rotate, in this case Flacken. The other thing that we can notice in the optimal team here is that it doesn't have Son, who is of course a popular player in many teams. But I think with Spurs now struggling and Son being at quite a high price, it could be a reason for the solver to sell him. I think also by selling Son, it allows you to, of course, upgrade elsewhere. And that's something I'm thinking about as well. Currently in my wildcard, I still have Son, but I have quite a weak bench, especially for the attack. And with so many midfielders doing quite well, For example, I could downgrade Son to Sterling, who has good upcoming fixtures, or you could also, of course, go for Gordon, or like in this case for Hichan. Then, of course, you save some budget, which you can then use to upgrade your attack, like here going for Darwin or maybe going for Isaac. And of course, there's also still Watkins from Villa who you can consider. So I'm thinking about doing that as well, just strengthening my overall team by selling Son. Even though, I think Son can still do well in the next games. I think Spurs can easily reverse the trend. And if they win now the next game against City, then probably we all want to invest again in Spurs. So as always, it's a bit of a risk. But yeah, from current perspective, it looks, I think it could make sense. So yeah, just a few things there. And the other thing maybe I wanted to say is in defense, Arsenal have a really strong defense. I think everybody is now convinced of that. Most teams have one Arsenal defender, and I think if you want to be different and if you want to benefit from it, you could go for a second Arsenal defender, or of course for going for Raya in goal. That's another consideration. And Pedro Porro, I mentioned him before. He looks really good. So that will be a player who I will also be keeping in my team, even though Spurs are struggling. Pedro Porro is scoring assists. He's also taking a lot of free kicks, corner kicks. So it's really a good player, I think, to have in the team. All right, I think that summarizes it a bit. Also, my team is not too different. There are a few differences, of course, but the main one was what I just mentioned. I still have Son currently in the team, but I also actually might think that to sell him just to move funds elsewhere. Let's see. All right, the solver actually also has some transfers in mind. It will keep the team for game week 14 and 15, but then it will sell Salah to go to Son in game week 16, which looks a bit strange, but I think that is to free up some budget. As then in 17 it will upgrade Tsimikas for Trippier, as Trippier has a good game against Fulham at home. So yeah, that looks like a good option. And then from 17 to 18, it will sell Haaland to Watkins. And I think that's mostly done because Haaland will have the blank in 18. And the solver will buy Haaland back instead of Darwin in 19. So yeah, that's a little bit a strange one, I think. It will cost you 2 transfers. Personally, I think I will just put Haaland on the bench. But yeah, it is, of course, a way to do it. Watkins has a good game in game week 18 against Sheffield at home. So yeah, you could of course bet on that one and sell Haaland for one game week. Just keep an eye on the transfer value. Make sure that you don't lose too much there. But it could be an option, of course, to sell Haaland for a week and then to bring him back. Okay, that's the optimal team, including transfers. And then the last chart is the captaincy options, as we usually cover. And again, it's a difficult one because, as I mentioned before, the top teams have good home games. And we can also see that here from this chart. Haaland and Salah are actually quite close in EV here in the ensemble model. Haaland has 7.92 EV and Salah has 7.91, so quite high EV. Then Mbeumo at home against Luton, 6.59. Saka against Wolves, 5.9. And Watkins against Bournemouth, 5.39. And if we look at the different models, then 3 models have Haaland as number 1 captaincy option and 4 models have Salah. So it's really close, and I think it comes down to personal preference. I think if you look at purely the fixture, the Liverpool fixture looks better at home against Fulham, while City plays at home against Tottenham. But yeah, as mentioned before, Tottenham is struggling. Especially in defense. So yeah, Haaland could have a good game there. And yeah, we know that Haaland is in great form. He's been scoring goals almost in every week recently. So it's quite a safe bet going for Haaland. But same could be said for Salah. So it's not easy. And I actually think you could say the same for Saka at home against Wolves, because Wolves will face a few suspensions. So they will be weakened in this game. And that could also be good for Saka. Difficult one. Currently, I'm not sure. I went against Haaland last week and it backfired, so I'm kind of thinking about Haaland. But Salah at home against Fulham looks very attractive as well. I'm not sure yet. Not easy. Okay, well, the last thing I still wanted to cover is also the mini league, as we always do every week. The number of teams went up again, so that's great. Thank you for that. We now have 343 teams in it, so that's a nice number, 343 formation. Thanks for joining, and you can still join if you want to. The code is 0JSDLA. The top three changed, and unfortunately our friend, the 9-year-old Wyatt Haswell, has dropped from number 1 to number 4. So I'm sorry for that, Wyatt. And I think what's even worse is that his dad, Derek, overtook him now on the 3rd spot. So Derek, man, what's going on there? I can imagine that Wyatt didn't appreciate it. But don't give up, Wyatt. You can still fight back. But Derek, yeah, well done. You had a good game week with 57 points. And you're now on 877 points in total. So that's pretty amazing. Number 2 position is from Matthew Allen, who was number 3 last week. His team, Grand Haven Broncos, has a total of 882 points. And actually, that's the same as the number 1. So, yeah, I should say we have 2 leaders. It's Matthew, and it's also Doom9 with the team Bloom. Well done, and keep it up. All right, I think I can close the episode then. I made it until the end, probably a bit faster than usual. That's because Sertop just speaks slower. That's again a joke, another joke. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be gentle, as it was quite different and also difficult to do it alone. And I certainly hope that Sertop will be back soon again, as it's just more fun to do this together. This was FPL Optimized Podcast, episode number 68. Thanks for listening. Good luck with making your Gameweek 14 decisions, and we hope your arrow will be green. And just talking about the shirt, as normally Sertop would ask that question. Today, I actually have a new shirt, Tusker FC. It's a team from the Kenyan League, Kenya, as in Africa. Didn't know the team, but my wife was there last week, and she came back with this shirt. So that was really good because, I was out of shirts. So yeah, today it's this one. I actually quite like it. So yeah, Tusker FC it is. For the podcast, we still need to decide what we will do next week, as there will be a midweek game week. So keep that in mind. Could be difficult for us to record something before game week 15, but otherwise, we'll be back for game week 16. And, in any case, and as mentioned before, the busy season is coming up, so make sure your team is ready for it. Make sure also to subscribe to our podcast so you'll get notified when the next episode is released. And do follow us on Twitter. For Sertop, it's at SertopBilal, and for me, it's at BelfiBB. And you can also find us now on YouTube. Until next time, stay curious and stay analytical. Goodbye.